This vaccine is miraculous in the way it works on COVID. It definitely works. Really, really well, actually. Much better than ever expected on COVID itself. But vaccination always carries some risks, and a small percentage of the population will have bad reactions. So, in my view, the forcing of people to be vaccinated is just straight out immoral and a gross overreach of any kind of power we should be giving to the government.
And I don't want to alert the audience or scare you. I have no interest in spooking everybody and making a big kerfuffle. Some people enjoy that. I don't. These vaccines work. They're saving lives. But in some people, they're having these adverse events.
Does it bother you that the news network you work for out and out lied, just outright lied about me taking horse dewormer?
They shouldn't have said that.
Why did they do that?
I don't know.
Well, g'day and welcome to episode 72 of The Other Side with Damian Coory, the show that brings you news on the issues that matter from a classical liberal centre-right perspective to counter the left-wing cultural bias of Australia's ABC and a lot of other mainstream media in our country. I've often said on the show that there is just so much information out there about COVID and the COVID vaccines that it's impossible for an ordinary person to get their head around it. The other problem is that we can't get our heads around it because it's highly technical stuff, and for a lot of it, you need to have a degree in medicine or biology or biochemistry just to understand it, which is way beyond my training. So we do just have to accept the word of experts and authorities on some things. That's how our society and our culture works. One of the reasons that conspiracy theories are so attractive to people is that they can make us feel smarter than we actually are. But there are many common mistakes that people make when looking at information online. And if our culture is going to survive this world of masses of readily available information, we're going to have to learn about some of these mistakes so we don't get fooled by people who might be misleading us, either accidentally or deliberately. We need to all get a lot smarter at the sorting out of the real info from the BS. That's what we try to do a bit of on this show. But it is hard. And we will sometimes get things wrong, and when we do, when new info comes in, or anything that comes to light that shows that we were wrong or that's better or better tested than other information, we will do our best to update it for you as soon as possible. So what are some of these common thinking mistakes that we all tend to make? Well, my favorite thinking error is the confusion of correlation with causation. This one should be taught to every single journalism student that goes through our universities. And back in my day, it wasn't. I hope it is now. Conspiracy theory friends like to talk about joining the dots. I've joined all the dots, right? And they join lots and lots of dots. But every time there's a weak connection, their whole theory just gets exponentially weaker and weaker and weaker. Just because two things happen together doesn't mean that one caused the other. For example, did you know that shark attacks are directly correlated to ice cream sale increases? This is true. When anything is correlated, two things that happen together, with one increasing when the other increases and one decreasing when the other decreases, you have to remember that it does not mean that there's any causal link at all. In other words, if A goes up when B goes up and A goes down when B goes down, we cannot say that A causes B. It could be that B causes A. It could also be that some other factor, let's call it C, causes both A and B. And sometimes we may not even know what C is. Now, my example of the correlation between shark attacks and ice cream sales is an example of this kind of correlation caused by something else completely. Can you guess what that is? Yep, it's the weather, summertime. There are more shark attacks and ice cream sold in summertime. So when shark attacks go up, so do ice cream sales. They are correlated. But ice cream sales do not cause shark attacks. A doesn't cause B, and shark attacks don't cause ice cream sales. B doesn't cause A. It's summertime. That's factor C causing both. So when you see correlation, it suggests there might be a causal link, but we have to go looking for it, and we have to consider all the external factors that might be causing both. Now, another thing that people do, and this is a really dumb one, which probably explains why TV journalists keep doing it, is giving statistics out of context. All the way through the COVID crisis, we've been told about the number of cases. But the number of cases, being any positive test results going up on any given day, could be caused by people doing more testing that day. So not knowing the other number, how many people got tested today, means that all case data is a bit of a waste of time. If you defined cases as people with 3 or more symptoms or people who show up at hospital, then you can make far better judgments about where we are in terms of any pandemic. So always go looking for the missing context. Here's a good example of that in a popular meme that's been going around vaccine circles lately, the vaccine adverse reactions. This is the VAERS data. That's America's Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System. It shows that up until mid-October, there have been 17,000 deaths and 83,000 hospitalizations reported in the 28 days after vaccination. This sounds awful, right? I mean, this vaccine should immediately be banned. But if you were in charge of banning or keeping the vaccine, what other information might you need to make the right decision? Well, firstly, you'd want to know if there's causality or if it's just a coincidental correlation. How could we work that out? Well, we could go looking for the missing context. So VAERS is a national reporting organization in America. First thing we've got to do is flip that switch at the top that isolates just America and its territories. Okay, so that took the deaths down to less than half. So now we have a bit under 8,000 deaths and only 37,000 hospitalizations. Okay, so how many people in America got the vaccine? 220 million people have had the vaccine in the United States. So 8,000 out of 220 million is 1 in 27,500 people vaccinated dying within 28 days of having the vaccine. Okay, it's not very many, but it's no good if you happen to be that 1 in 27,500. What else do we need to know before we ban this nasty vaccine? Well, it'd be good to know how many of the deaths were a coincidence and how many weren't, right? How could we work that out? Well, we could try to work out how many vaccinated Americans would have died anyway in the same period, even if they hadn't been vaccinated. Now, that is known as the background death rate, and thankfully someone else has already done that for us. The link is in the program notes. And looking at just the vaccinated population of the United States, 200,000 vaccinated people should die in any 28-day period of something. That means 7,100 should have died the day of the vaccination anyway, and every single day after that for 28 days. Remember, every death within 28 days after a vaccination is supposed to be reported. So our number of 7,848 deaths in 28 days is in fact very low. Now, some people will say, okay, well, the VAERS data is underreported. Many more people are dying and getting really sick than we know about. Okay, but there'd need to be underreporting of adverse events at a rate of 26 times for the death rate to exceed the 200,000 that we were expecting in the normal population. It's a similar story for anaphylaxis. About 800 people every day in America get anaphylaxis. In 28 days, there should be a lot more than 7,500 anaphylaxis cases. So this VAERS data, as scary as it sounds, as scary as it looks when you put it in a meme like that, actually tells us absolutely nothing. So whenever you see data, ask where is the context? What information is missing? Because the context really matters. So where are we with COVID? Let's check in with that YouTube COVID guru, medico Dr. John Campbell, for a quick update of the numbers that actually matter. Comparing case numbers across countries first of all.
Now these are new daily confirmed cases per million people. So we see that in New Zealand a little bit of a pickup. Canada going down, Australia going down slightly. Australia's still doing really quite well. But we do notice a couple of European countries, and this is indicative of other European countries going up. Netherlands, sharp rise in cases as we come into autumn. Ireland, a sharp rise in cases as we come into autumn. But the United States continuing its downward trend, which is looking very promising. United Kingdom still going up, but actually the United Kingdom has been going down for the last 4 days, and we'll look at this good reason to believe that cases are going to go down in the United Kingdom pretty soon.
Now, as I've said, I'm not a fan of case number data, but it is okay to help see general trends in countries. It's the hospitalisation and death data that's the most important. So let's take a look at those. Remember, Dr. Campbell will show us numbers adjusted for population. So this data are all per million people that any country has. Let's start with hospitalisations.
So the Netherlands at the bottom, then Canada, Ireland going up, United Kingdom, I'm afraid, still going up. Now, of course, the 4-day reduction in the United Kingdom has not fed through yet, as you wouldn't expect. So that's still the consequences of the increase in cases over the last few weeks that we've had in the United Kingdom. But hospitalisations in the States going down nicely. But we do notice that they're still higher than the UK, Ireland, Canada and the Netherlands. So although the trend is good, we're not quite there yet with the United States, but good to see that downward trend.
Unfortunately, the death rates in the United States remain quite high.
New data confirmed deaths in the United States have remained stubbornly high. Look at the high deaths in the States. So New Zealand, low number of deaths, of course. Australia, Netherlands, Canada, Ireland has had an increase. United Kingdom, slight increase as we would expect from the increase in cases. But the United States actually remains pretty high.
Now, I'm a bit suspicious of those US death numbers. I mean, I know Joe Biden is president and that must be depressing for people. But again, I think raw data may be influenced by different methods of counting deaths in different countries. They count COVID a bit like they count vaccine deaths. It's any death that occurs within a certain time period after a positive test. Now, America has 57% of its population fully vaccinated. That's not that far behind the rest of the developed world. So we don't have context. So only the trend is worth noting, probably not the raw numbers there.
And then share of the population fully vaccinated. Well, again, this is really quite interesting. We see the United States has dropped below a lot of the other nations. So Australia and New Zealand well and truly taken over the United States now. Then the United Kingdom, then the Netherlands, then Canada, and then Ireland.
Dr. Campbell also reports that the London School of Tropical Medicine and Health, which is one of the UK's most prominent modelling organisations, has predicted an imminent drop in infections in the UK in the next month or so. It was expected that over winter cases would go up again, more people staying indoors, more cold, vaccines being less effective over time, increasing contacts between people indoors, kids back at school now. All those things have been driving the recent UK spike in case numbers. But Professor John Edmonds from the school says that the country is reaching a point of endemic equilibrium. Dr. Campbell explains what this means.
If it's endemic, and I'm getting reinfected every 3 months, say, or every 6 months, as I do with cold viruses or the other coronaviruses, then of course every time I get reinfected with SARS coronavirus 2, that's going to give my immunity a boost, because I'm going to be re-exposed to it, and that's going to re-stimulate my immune system. So if I get a minor disease, if I get exposed and get a minor disease, you could argue that that's a really good thing because it's going to boost my immunity. Then 3-4 months later, I might get it again, but that time I might be minimally symptomatic or even asymptomatic, which of course doesn't concern me too much. So this is fairly hopeful that this disease is going to sort of melt into the background. But of course, many countries are nowhere near that stage yet.
So that's Dr. John Campbell, whose daily videos really are a great source of news on all things COVID. The link is in our program notes. Now, there's lots of scary info out there about the vaccines. Everyone who watches this show knows that I am very opposed to any kind of government mandates or coercion for vaccinations. This vaccine is miraculous in the way it works on COVID. It definitely works. Really, really well, actually. Much better than ever expected on COVID itself. But vaccination always carries some risks, and a small percentage of the population will have bad reactions. So, in my view, the forcing of people to be vaccinated is just straight out immoral and a gross overreach of any kind of power we should be giving to the government. Only you can decide for yourself what risks you want to take. Likewise, forcing cafes and restaurants to check vax status and turn people away is also immoral and wrong, in my view. You could mount a moral case that one person being vaccinated will lessen risk for another, but this is especially not true in the case of COVID vaccines. I think it is worth getting vaccinated in Australia for most people because for most people, the risk from COVID after we open up will be higher than the risk of an adverse reaction to the vaccine. But it must be your choice, not the government's. And I think our governments have done an appalling job of managing the public right through this crisis, and an appalling communications and educational job. They've been playing politics with your health, and they must be punished for it, and hopefully will be at the next election. The Australian newspaper's latest news poll out this week showed 13% support for the other category. That's the brown line at the bottom of the graph there, which is mostly the Liberal Democrats and Clive Palmer's UAP. It also shows about 3% for One Nation. It still astounds me that the Greens sit on 11% of the vote and that people keep buying the lie that they're an environmental party. They are not. They are a socialist party using the environment as a cover. They're watermelons, green on the outside but red all the way through. Wake up, people. If you're left-wing, I suggest two things. One, vote Labor, not Green. And two, get a basic economics education so you understand what really helps the poor and the planet to thrive and enhances health, well-being, longevity, happiness, and social justice. It's classical liberalism and free market capitalism. Anyway, back to the chart. So we have the Labor Party on 37% of the primary vote and the Liberal Party down to 35%. Now, you'd think that nearly all of those United Australia Party, Liberal Democrat and One Nation votes would flow to the Liberal Party on preferences, right? So you could add 16% to the Libs. Most people who vote Conservative minor parties are going to put the Libs after that on their ballot paper. And then take the Green vote and add it to Labor, because most people who vote for the Greens would be dumb enough to put Labor as number 2 on their ballot. And that'd give you the final two-party preferred result of the election. So we could add 16% to the Libs, 35, giving us 51, and 11% to Labor, giving us 48. But no, the two-party preferred vote doesn't flow that way in real life. Now, News Poll uses the last election's preference flows to work out the two-party preferred. And based on the last election's flows, this is the result. Labor is on 54%, and the Coalition is on just 46%. And Anthony Albanese becomes Prime Minister of Australia. I think in this election, though, a lot more people are going to put a minor party first. As you all know, I'm a supporter of free market liberalism in small government. I want government out of my life, fewer laws, and to be basically left alone. So I'd like to see the Liberal Democrats who support freedom and democracy getting a lot of the people into the Senate and quite a few into the House of Representatives too. So I hope a lot of people put the Liberal Democrats first. That's the Lib Dems. But who you put afterwards is going to matter a lot this time. In what order you put Labor and Liberal on your ballot paper is going to determine who the Prime Minister is. So do take care when numbering the ballot. And remember, you can make up your own mind. You do not have to follow any party's how to vote card. You can put those numbers in any order you like. Anyway, back to vaccination. I'm concerned that there's a lot of misinformation out there from well-meaning people that's scaring the living daylights out of people in regard to the vaccines. Vaccine risks are real. And as I said, mandatory vaccination and coercion are wrong and immoral. But these vaccines are not too bad in terms of adverse events, as that data we discussed earlier seems to show. So if you're having the vaccine, there's not much point in getting super worried about it. But let's start by taking a look at how the mRNA vaccines actually work. For this, I recommend the excellent Aussie medical training duo of Dr. Matt and Dr. Mike from YouTube.
So in front of me, I have a virus. I have the virus that causes COVID-19. This is SARS-CoV-2. What you can see on the outside of this virus are these spikes. These are the spike proteins. These are the proteins that our immune system picks up to notify our body that it's foreign and we need to build immunity against it. Now, I reach into this virus and what I can find here is all the genetic material. So this is all the genetic material for the whole entire virus. So this little section here would make a particular protein here. This section here would make another protein. But this part of the RNA, let me circle it. This part of the mRNA would code and create these spike proteins. So what scientists can do is extract just that RNA, and we can use that in our vaccine, and now we can inject it into the arm.
Now, that messenger RNA, the mRNA, is just the recipe for the spike protein. It's not the spike protein itself.
So once that mRNA is in the cells of my arm, those cells can then take the mRNA instruction, which then says, make this. So they turn that mRNA into, basically, a whole bunch of these spike proteins. Now, by themselves, these spike proteins can't do anything, but the immune system recognizes these spike proteins as not belonging to us. So they mount an immune response to it.
So then if you encounter the real virus, you have a degree of immunity against it. But that mRNA that I put in your arm, what happens to that?
So the mRNA stays within the cytoplasm. It doesn't jump into the nucleus where the DNA is. The dogma of biology is it goes DNA, mRNA, proteins. It doesn't go backwards. So the mRNA doesn't go into the nucleus and incorporate into the DNA. In actual fact, much like Snapchat, once that mRNA is viewed, it's gone.
That's Dr. Matt and Dr. Mike, and they are great. Make sure you check them out. The link is in our program notes. Now, the important bit there is that the spike proteins do not leave the cells. They are broken down within the cells before being eliminated by the body. Well, one of the worst and scariest stories going around about the vaccines is that the spike proteins somehow accumulate in the organs of the body. You may have heard the one about them accumulating in the ovaries of women. Now, this story started with the release, under a Freedom of Information request, of an internal Pfizer study done in Japan. It was the exact kind of research that Pfizer should be doing to test the vaccines. Bombshell, bombshell, screamed the Facebook page Detox Info back in June. Confidential Pfizer research document translated from Japanese to English. Okay, so that sounds scary, until you realize it was marked confidential simply because it was an internal document, like so many internal documents are in big companies. And it was translated from Japanese to English because it was first written in Japanese. The Facebook post continues, biodistribution study of mRNA vaccines proves the mRNA moves from the injection site to the blood, then circulates spike proteins throughout the body, attacking the ovaries, liver, neurological tissues, other organs. This is the study that will result in mRNA vaccines being pulled from the market. Well, that would be scary. That'd be really terrifying. It'd scare me if one tiny drop of it was true. But that's not even what the study was looking at. Dr. Mobeen Syed is an American doctor and software engineer who runs an educational website for other doctors called drbean.com. He explained in great detail in a video recently why that internal Pfizer study from Japan does not provide any evidence whatsoever that the spike protein is doing anything in the body. In fact, it actually says that the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine mRNA is broken down inside the cells when it's used up, and that the spike protein manufactured from the mRNA is subject to a process that will also break it down inside the cell.
The basic question that they're answering is, or asking, is that what happens to the lipids from the lipid nanoparticle, the nanoparticle that contains the messenger RNA and is injected in us? What will be the fate of the parts of that particle? That is the basic study here. So imagine that this is the lipid nanoparticle, and this particle has multiple pieces to it. One of those, and this is not the actual structure, I just made those as illustrations or representations. So there is ALC0315, which is an aminolipid. Then we have ALC0159, which is the polyethylene glycol. Ideally, it should be like this here, but anyways, I made it as a piece. This piece, and then there are more things, and inside it is messenger RNA. If we can just go through these 2-3 lines, the whole thing becomes clear, and we become clear as what are they talking about and what are the people talking about. Here is what they're saying. They're saying BNT162b2, the BioNTech vaccine, is degraded, is broken down by ribonucleases. So this is the messenger RNA we're talking about, is degraded by ribonucleases in captured cells and nucleic acids.
So that simply means the mRNA itself is broken down inside the cell, and so is the spike protein that the mRNA produces. And as we said, even if a spike protein escapes, it'll also be broken down by another process that happens outside the cells. This study wasn't even looking at that process.
If anyone else is using this study to say that in the ovaries will be the spike protein, they are wrong.
Okay, now the vaccine is more than just the mRNA. The mRNA has got to be carried inside something. In the case of the mRNA vaccines, they use a nanoparticle, a microscopically small particle, made up of fats or lipids. Now, what happens to that stuff? That is what this study was actually testing. Where do the lipids go?
The question that I asked in May 2020, last year, May, what will happen to lipid nanoparticle? How will we kick it out of our body? Will it ever get out, or would it accumulate somewhere in our body and be there forever? The problem with that is that maybe one-time vaccine, a tiny piece, it doesn't even matter. But what if children are getting vaccines, or what if we now need to have boosters? Would this be a problem? So that is answered here in this one. This is a beautiful study.
So there are two lipids, 0315 and 0159. Half of the 0159 is just pooped out. But most of the 0315 isn't. So where does the remainder go?
So where did it get out? So first thing, when it encountered the liver, within 6 hours to 2 days, if it was intramuscular, so please switch for a second to intramuscular. If it was intramuscular, within 2 days, liver cleared it out. If it was intravenous, then because it would go and sit down in various tissues, it would take up to 9 days to be removed. But it will be removed in both cases.
Now, the vaccine is an intramuscular injection, IM. They put it in the muscles of your arm, not directly into the blood vessels like an intravenous injection or IV. Now, the reason that they tested these two things differently is that when you go IV, you're going to get more of the stuff spread throughout the body. Now, we get the injection intramuscularly, so it should only take 2 days before it's out of your body, and 80% of it doesn't even get past your arm muscle. So let's go back to that Detox Info Facebook post and see how you are being manipulated. Proves the mRNA moves from the injection site to the blood, then circulates spike proteins throughout the body, attacking the ovaries, liver, neurological tissues, and other organs. This is the study that will result in mRNA vaccines being pulled from the market. Absolute proof of system-wide dangers to the body. So that language is very hyped up. And that's probably a good sign. You should be very, very skeptical and wary that it's not really scientific and might be clickbait. And look at the language. Proves is in all caps. Circulates spike proteins. It doesn't really circulate anything. Attacking the ovaries. There's definitely no attacking going on. Absolute proof. Well, that's just a lie. It's absolute nonsense. So do watch for language like that. Scientists are taught not to hype things up too much. So if it's real science, it isn't going to be written that way. But it's a funny time we live in. Why? Because all this stuff is out there and available as it never was before. And don't get me wrong, I think that's a good thing. I'm deeply opposed to censorship. I do not think Facebook and Twitter and YouTube should have to police this stuff. We have to police it for ourselves. And if we have free speech, the truth will eventually come out. The last thing you want is big government or big corporations putting themselves in the middle and telling us what we can and can't read. Or worse, using this situation to justify censorship. When a government or big tech says, oh, it's for your own good, or we're keeping you safe, we should be just as skeptical as we are of those clickbait headlines. Now, all of this, of course, doesn't mean that the vaccines are 100% safe. There's just no such thing. Some people are having reactions. Adverse events do occur. They are real, and we must report them and pay attention to them. If you have an adverse reaction, insist that your medical experts officially report it. And if they don't report it, you report it for them. Call the health department in your state. Demand some kind of response and record be taken. Some people are having allergic reactions. Some are having flare-ups of pre-existing autoimmune conditions. And the pericarditis and myocarditis numbers are statistically significant. There are always risks with vaccines, but talk to your doctor when you're deciding to have a vaccine or not. They went to medical school and did all that work so you don't have to. And don't be so quick to toss out decades of medical science and research because of a screaming headline you might have read on Facebook. Oh, and respect people who choose not to be vaccinated. I'm still yet to see a very strong case for mandated vaccination or government bullying, coercion of the nature that we're seeing across our country at the moment. Now, back to that Pfizer study. Lots of people write to me and say, but Dr. Malone, Dr. Robert Malone, the inventor of mRNA technology, says this or says that. So it'd be interesting to see what Dr. Malone's take on this Japanese report was. There's a link in the program notes to an interview he did with the TrialSite News podcast with Dr. Erin Stair. TrialSite asked him to review the study. Now, that video is just way too technical for me to put much of it in the show. I had to listen to it about 5 times to even begin to understand it. But basically what Dr. Malone is saying is it was done on mice. It was a bit rushed because it was done early. It's outdated, and it didn't follow the very high-level protocols that are usually followed in preclinical trials. Now, he says this doesn't mean it's not useful, but it does mean there's still a lot we don't know.
What has a lot of people concerned is in this imperfect, small rodent experiment, one of the things that's striking, you see the lipids and the RNA going to organs that you would expect it to go to, like liver and spleen. But the lipid part, strangely, in female rodents, collects at about 12% of the total injected in the ovaries, but not in the testes. That's kind of odd. It also goes to bone marrow and other sites. So for some reason, the lipids are accumulating in the ovary, although the RNA isn't. Why is that? How is that happening? Unknown. Does it mean anything? Unknown. Because we didn't do reproductive tox experiments. And we don't really have any prior experience with this novel synthetic lipid. So a lot of folks got pretty bent up and said, oh, this means that the stuff in the bone marrow is going to cause leukemia. And Steve said these things on the Weinstein podcast, and I couldn't get a word in edgewise with him. But these things were said, that you could have these bone marrow diseases and you could have horrible reproductive effects. And the truth is, I can't say that there won't be problems because I don't have the data. We don't have the data.
So that's
it doesn't mean that they're absolutely going to happen either.
Right. And I think you cleared up something that a lot of people think. It's the lipids in these preclinical studies that were in the ovary, not the messenger RNA, which codes for the spike protein. So that means
Bingo.
Your ovarian cells were not expressing this spike protein.
Well, so there you said it. I can't say that they weren't.
Okay. Well, I can't either.
I would say that. Yeah, nobody can. Okay, that's the whole problem.
Okay.
Is that the studies weren't done well, and so we're left with all of these coulda, shoulda, woulda. What's happening? And that's what's a little odd here. Is normally all that stuff would have been cleared up, and for some reason it wasn't. Presumably because everybody was in a rush because they wanted to save the world for good reason. And they were doing, presumably the best of intentions. But to say to the public, no corners were cut, isn't really true. And that's where I start to have problems with all this. is I think that the government owes it to their populace to be open and transparent about what's true, what's known, and what's unknown, because they're obligated to, and the pharmaceutical company is obligated to fully disclose all risks, because this is a fundamental precept of bioethics in human subject research. Full stop.
Yes, and in my area of expertise, crisis communications, it is a cornerstone of maintaining public trust. But we've never dealt with a world with so much information available before, especially technical info being available to non-technical audiences. Listening to Dr. Syed and Dr. Malone, I'm still not sure what the risks exactly are. All I can do is try to let the dialogue happen. Censorship of the conversation does not enhance trust. It fuels mistrust, and it causes conspiracy theories to flourish and to be more trusted.
Being honest with people, and it's part of informed consent, and like saying what you know and what you don't know, part of informed consent. But that also doesn't mean it has to take away from the efficacy of the vaccines or like the great benefit that we're seeing in terms of how they're working. And
completely
people
agree.
Yeah, both of those things can be true at the same time.
Yep.
And
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that's like, I think sometimes people they try to like reduce you to like one side, and you're just like trying to, be scientific.
I'm a scientist.
Yeah.
I'm a scientist, right? I live in a world in which almost nothing is known. I mean, if you ask me, how much do you actually know about this? 9 times out of 10, I'm probably going to say, I don't really know the answer.
Yeah.
And I try hard to be honest. And that's the nature of science.
Right.
And it's the nature of scientific discussion is then us scientists and physicians like yourself have this active dialogue where, and we use this term hypothesis instead of fact, where we're constantly kind of second guessing ourselves and each other, saying, are you sure this is really what's going on? And that's why we have to not be censored. We have to be able to talk about this. That's how we get to truth, or our version of truth.
Exactly. Dr. Robert Malone, one of the inventors of mRNA technology there on the TrialSite's podcast with Dr. Erin Stair. As the truth becomes known over time, we can also start to work out which sources are honest and which are not. Like CNN, who openly, consciously, and deliberately tried to manipulate us all by reporting that podcast star Joe Rogan took horse dewormer because he was taking ivermectin when he got COVID. CNN's head TV doctor, Sanjay Gupta, went on Rogan's podcast, and Rogan gave him hell.
So for you, Joe Rogan,
yes,
I would say you've had it.
Yes.
So now get one shot of the vaccine.
No.
Why not?
Because I have better immunity than I would if I was vaccinated. Right?
Yes.
Don't I?
I think your immunity is really good.
So why, if I've already gotten through COVID and I was really only sick for a day, and then 5 days later I was negative, and I do have the natural antibodies now, why would I take a chance in getting vaccinated on top of that?
By the way, I'm glad you're better. I'm glad it only lasted a day.
You're probably the only one at CNN that's glad.
No. We're not.
The rest of them are all lying about me taking horse medication. And we should talk about that.
That bothered you.
It should bother you too. They're lying at your network about people taking human drugs versus drugs for veterinary.
Calling it a horse dewormer is not a flattering thing. I get that.
It's a lie. It's a lie on a news network, and it's a lie that's a willing. That's a lie that they're conscious of. It's not a mistake.
Yeah.
They're unfavorably framing it as veterinary medicine.
Well, the FDA put this thing out. You saw that. Did you see that thing that the FDA put out?
What did the FDA put out?
It was a tweet, and it was snarky. I admit it. They said, you are not a horse, you are not a cow, stop taking this stuff, or something like that.
Why would you say that when you're talking about a drug that's been given out to billions and billions of people, a drug that was responsible for one of the inventors of it winning the Nobel Prize in 2015?
Yeah.
Yeah, a drug that has been shown to stop viral replication in vitro. You know that, right? Why would they lie and say that's horse dewormer? I can afford people medicine, motherfucker. This is ridiculous. It's just a lie.
I don't think anyone is
But don't you think that a lie like that is dangerous on a news network when you know that they know they're lying? You know that they know that I took medicine. Like, here it is. This is ivermectin.
You got
This
it
is
with
right
you.
here. Somebody gave it to me.
All right, hang on. The thing is, we're like going so fast. Like I feel like I'm missing.
Do you think that's a problem that your news network lies?
Well, I don't.
Dude,
what did they say?
They lied
What
and
did they
said
say?
I was taking horse dewormer. First of all, it was prescribed to me by a doctor.
Yeah.
Along
They
with
shouldn't have said it was
a bunch of other
if it was-
medications.
if you got a human pill, because there were people that were taking it, the veterinary medication, and you're not, obviously. You got it from a doctor, so that it shouldn't be called that. Ivermectin can be a very effective medication for parasitic disease. And as you say, it's probably, I think a 250 million people have taken it around the world.
More,
I get that.
Way more.
So
way more. Billions of people have taken it.
Can I just come back to the one I want to talk about? Two
No.
things on the ledger.
You have, before we get to that, does it bother you that the news network you work for out and out lied, just outright lied about me taking horse dewormer?
They shouldn't have said that.
Why did they do that?
I don't know.
You didn't ask? You didn't think that was you're the medical guy over there.
I didn't ask. I should have asked before coming on your podcast.
But they did it with such glee.
No,
yes,
Joe.
they did. I watched.
You watched?
I watched.
You watched? No, I don't think there's
yes,
glee.
They did.
I don't. No one takes.
Joe Rogan says he has COVID, taking livestock drug despite warnings. Yeah.
Jamie had to pull this up.
You want to play it?
Does she
This
have
is
glee?
your news network.
I'm going to watch.
Let's see.
I'm going to watch.
Rogan telling his 13 million Instagram followers that he was treated with several drugs, and he included ivermectin on the list, a drug used for livestock. The FDA and the CDC warn against using to treat COVID.
Turns out I got COVID.
Look, they put a yellow
we
filter on
immediately
me
through
too.
the kitchen sink at it. All kinds
did.
of meds, monoclonal
You see the original
antibodies,
video versus that? I look like shit there.
Z-Pack,
Do you know that?
I think you look good.
Pause. It's enough.
Prednisone.
That's enough, Jamie.
I don't think Aaron had glee.
Oh, well, it's more Brian Stelter was the gleeful one. But the point is, that's a lie.
It can be used for humans. I get it. I totally.
Not just could be used for humans, is often used for humans along with all the other drugs I took, all human drugs.
Yes.
They know it's a human drug.
It's right. But
they lied.
The thing
it's defamatory.
It is yeah, they shouldn't have done that.
It's defamatory, right?
Well, I don't know if it's defamatory.
I bet it is.
Well, I'm not a lawyer.
It's a lie.
Well, see, here's the thing. You can have nuanced discussions about this.
No,
right?
you can't.
Yeah,
you can't have nuanced discussions about lying about someone taking horseshoe
There
wormer.
was no glee, by the way, from her. She
Well,
was.
I
I don't
didn't
think
watch her.
anyone takes people's illness.
Yes, they do.
They don't want you to get
stop
sick,
it.
Joe.
Yes, they do.
They
were
want you to
upset
get sick.
that I got healthy. That's one thing they didn't report on. The fact that I was negative 5 days later and working out 6 days later.
Wow, Joe is not letting up there, and nor should he. I wanted to play that full 4 minutes uncut because I think it's important. CNN's ratings are falling through the floor, and it's no wonder. So you would think the network would show some humility after taking a whack like that. But no, they doubled down and went on the attack, with segments trying to take down Rogan's credibility.
Our chief medical correspondent, Dr. Sanjay Gupta, sat down for a 3-hour one-on-one with controversial podcast host Joe Rogan last night. Rogan remains a vaccine skeptic despite having caught COVID-19 himself.
They played a whole bunch of clips, but not one clip of the bit that I just showed you where Rogan was hitting Sanjay over the horse dewormer lie.
He seems to go back time and again to this idea that maybe getting COVID is better than getting the vaccine. I heard that repeatedly. Here's some of what he said.
Testing is obviously testing you to see if you have the virus.
Yes.
The therapeutic is to treat you because you have the virus.
Yes.
I still think it'd be better not to get the virus.
I think it'd be better to get the virus and recover and have amazing immunity to it. Wouldn't it be?
Well, you could get sick, though.
You know what I think you should do? I think you should get
sick.
vaccinated and then get sick.
What?
This is why. Because then you got the vaccine protects you from a bad infection, and then you get COVID, so then you get the robust immunity that's imparted from having the actual disease itself, which is far more complex and comprehensive than you're getting from the vaccine that targets one specific protein, right?
You can make that argument, I think.
Yeah, so that's the move. You get vaccinated, let it wane, and hang around with a bunch of dirty people.
Okay, well, I
then get a lot of therapeutics on hand so you can take care of it quickly.
I will see your recommendation
wanna do it?
and give you a
Should have come out with us last night. You probably would have caught it.
I almost did. Yeah. Now I know what your secret plan was. No. So for you, Joe Rogan.
Yes.
I would say you've had it.
Yes.
So now get one shot of the vaccine.
No.
Why not?
Because I have better immunity than I would if I was vaccinated.
But does he, Sanjay? Also, he's not a doctor. He sure is talking like one, as if he is one, though.
By the way, it was 3 hours of that, just to give you an idea. I mean, it was a lot of mental gymnastics. And again, there's a nuance here. People who have been infected do have natural immunity. And there was a study out of Israel, which made got a lot of attention, that basically showed, at least for a period of time, their immunity was stronger than those who had received the vaccine. Here's a problem, though. One is we don't know how long that immunity lasts. People are trying to investigate that. And one of the studies that's come out showed that people who had natural immunity versus vaccinated immunity, those with natural immunity were twice as likely to get reinfected. I mean, this is the data. We know with the vaccine now from the clinical trials and real world data, some 6 billion shots being given out around the world, that it is a safe and effective vaccine. So infection over vaccination should never be the message. No, people should not go out there and willingly get infected in pursuit of, this natural immunity. It's a terrible strategy.
I simply cannot believe that CNN tried to double down like that to save Sanjay's and their own reputation. Very bad strategy. This should all have been done with a tone of humility. Sanjay makes some good points at the end there, but it's the smugness of CNN that people can't stand, personified by people like that blonde talking head woman with her sneering and jeering. Do they understand that Rogan's audience dwarfs theirs, and that he has deep trust and relationship and credibility with his audience that today's CNN could only dream of? Probably not. We'll see you next time.
That's why they call you the Quiet Australians. They don't want you to be loud.
Hi, this is Damian Coory. If you enjoyed this episode of The Other Side, please like, subscribe, click every button and bell you possibly can on whatever platform you're on, and please tell your friends. That's the #1 way you can help us grow. If you'd like to join our VIP WhatsApp group and never miss an episode, because we'll send you a link as soon as they come out, just send us an email first on theothersideost@gmail.com. asking to opt in, and we'll add you to our VIP group. We'll send you a link so you can add yourself. It's a one-way group, not a chat group, so you won't be bombarded with messages or anything like that. And if you'd like to join the Discernible crew and get all the content from our platform, you can do that at discernable.io. discernable.io.